You're moving to Mexico for the wrong reasons. Hear me out. Politics, healthcare, cost of living, they're all very valid reasons to move to a new country. But if all it took was changing locations, then why are so many people struggling after they make their big move to Mexico? Well, today we want to shed some light on the important details to consider that make the difference between a well-prepared move and an impulsive decision. And we're doing this because we actually want you to thrive here in Mexico. And we're gonna go right straight into it, to the first wrong reason to move to Mexico, which is, I hate US politics. Yeah, we're gonna go there.
So no matter what side of the spectrum you're on in terms of politics, hating the situation in the US is a valid reason. We get tons of messages and emails that say something along the lines of, there's so much division here, I can't take it anymore, or I don't feel welcomed anymore in my own country, or even things like, I just want to be somewhere where politics doesn't affect my daily life. And again, it is a valid reason to move here, but we think it's incomplete.
Look, I get it. I totally understand where you're coming from with this because in 2014, I left my country, Venezuela, because of all the craziness that was going on down there. And I know what it feels like to want out and just to be done with the situation. And I know for sure that a lot of people in the US, they feel that way right now. And they're looking at Mexico kind of like as an escape. But there are actually three things that you have to consider, like this is our humble opinion, on why I hate US politics on its own. It's an incomplete thought. Number one, politics exists everywhere. So we didn't move to Mexico because of political reasons. We know ourselves pretty well and we kind of understand that we are much better and happier humans if we don't follow politics. So we're not on top of US politics. We're not like reading that stuff every single day. We're definitely not following Venezuelan politics because that would drive me insane. We also don't follow Dutch politics. He's Dutch. And now that we moved to Mexico, we're not on top of Mexican politics every day.
Yeah, I think if you are a more politically oriented human and that's just like part of your soul, just be aware that Mexico definitely has its own challenges. So do your research about like what values are important to you and see how kind of Mexico fits into that. Also, in terms of the specific place where you want to move, things vary quite a bit here in Mexico in terms of how liberal or how conservative certain places are. So also research into that. Also, if you're like frustrated by certain injustices or attacks on freedoms happening in the US, those similar things are kind of happening here in Mexico as well. So like the only reason you wouldn't really be affected by that is if you put some kind of blinder on. So just kind of like be aware that Mexico has challenges.
Yeah, so we're not trying to bash the US or Mexico. Actually, we're not saying one is better than the other, not at all. We chose to move here and we are extremely happy here in Mexico. And we also have a lot of love for the US. So we don't want this to be taken out of context. But again, what he said, if you are a person that's politically oriented, this is something that you do have to consider. And there's another thing that you have to think about when it comes to politics, which is local politics affect your daily life too.
So this is something that probably not a lot of people think about before moving to Mexico, but the local governments, like state governments and city governments, they vary quite a bit in terms of like how well funded and potentially like well managed they are. So certain things like public services can vary a lot by place to place. So like quality of the roads, the general infrastructure for utilities, also public safety, that can vary quite a bit. So for example, we stayed 1 month in Oaxaca several years back, and things like trash collection was literally non-existent. Like people were just throwing all their trash in kind of makeshift or impromptu trash.
And it was pretty stinky. We were lucky because our host picked up our trash because we were staying in an Airbnb, but like that doesn't happen here in Merida, where trash gets picked up 3 times a week, so and it never fails. So that is those little things that you do have to think about.
Yeah, and just like another example is, well, in December, so 3 months ago, we were in Cuernavaca, and we heard from a lot of local people that the governor there stole like millions and millions and millions of dollars that should have gone to the city, and then he just like disappeared. I don't know if it was a he or a she, and then he just disappeared and was never prosecuted.
He's like working in Mexico City as some kind, I don't even know.
So those things also affect.
Yeah, exactly. And there is another thing, and I think is the most important thing, is that if you're not careful, you can create literally the same environment you had in the US here.
So we mentioned that a lot of people are wanting to escape to Mexico for political reasons, and we also mentioned that a lot of people aren't so successful once they do come here to Mexico, and that's because if you're not careful and just surround yourself by the same kind of negative energy that like hating US politics entails, then you're not going to have like a much different experience here in Mexico if you're not careful with how you
Structure your
environment.
Yeah, so you have to really be intentional about who you surround yourself with, because if you're escaping politics, you don't want to have like the same here, but in a different country. So you do have to be careful. And all of this is not to say that you should not consider politics when you're moving to Mexico. If that is something that matters to you, of course, think about it. But there are different layers to it. And yeah, there's just like different things to think about. And just to be clear, this video is not about discouraging you from moving to Mexico. In fact, it is literally the opposite. We want you to move here if this is the right place for you. We want you to thrive here. We want you to be happy here. So the goal of this is to provide you everything that there is to think about, so you kind of know what to expect. And just make sure that you're not running away from something, but that you're actually moving towards something that is better for you. Okay, so that was the first wrong reason was I hate US politics, and now we're gonna move towards the second wrong reason, that it is kind of delicate, but it is very popular, and that reason is cost of living. I'm moving to Mexico because it's cheap.
So of course, we totally understand why the cost of living here in Mexico is a huge motivation for people to move here. It's crazy that people can work their whole lives in the US and not have enough to kind of retire there comfortably. So of course we understand the motivation to come here to Mexico, where in general things are more affordable. However, again, similar to the first wrong reason to move, we do think that this is kind of incomplete again, because there are so many other factors to kind of make this a successful move and so many other costs to consider that we just want to set you guys up for success.
Yeah, so instead of thinking like, oh, everything is so affordable in Mexico, I don't even need to plan that much, or I'm gonna live with like $1,500 a month, there are like definitely things that you have to think about before basing your entire move on cost alone. The first one being, the lifestyle you want might cost more than expected. If you're picturing a spacious home in a popular area, these prices are going to be very similar than US prices, especially if we're thinking about cities like Puerto Vallarta, Mexico City, San Miguel de Allende. It can be surprisingly expensive. And then when you factor in things like healthcare, eating out, your lifestyle, transportation, those costs quickly start adding up.
So for context, I think the least amount of money we've ever spent in 1 month was $2,300, and that doesn't include our business expenses, so just like more realistic expenses for you guys. And it's not exactly that we were just going out there and living our best life and, you know, enjoying hobbies that we used to enjoy in the US. It was still
we were
pretty
being careful. We
bare
were
bones.
Conservative. And again, I know there's a lot of videos out there that are like show like live with $1,000, with $1,500. And I'm sure they're true. Like, I'm not saying they're not. It's just like you really have to look at an extra layer there and just look at it with different eyes, just to see if that lifestyle matches what you want and what you're expecting your new life to look like. That is very important.
Number 2, you need a financial plan. So even though Mexico is generally more affordable than the US, that doesn't mean you can just come here and completely wing it. So you do need some kind of budget, a backup plan if something goes wrong, or some kind of financial cushion, because you're moving here to live in Mexico and life happens. So in certain emergencies, like you have some kind of like home repair that costs money, or if you have some kind of medical emergency, we'll talk about healthcare a little bit more later, but if you do have a medical emergency and you don't have private health insurance, it can literally cost you tens of thousands of dollars. So life happens and you definitely have to be prepared.
Number 3, there's a hidden cost of moving and settling in. So there are a lot of upfront costs that you have to factor in when you're moving down here to Mexico. And we actually just made a video about it, and the amount was pretty crazy. There's a lot to think about here. So you have to consider flights, facilitator fees, the temporary housing, selling all your stuff in the US and like figuring that out over there, whatever you're gonna do with that. And then you move here and you don't know if you're gonna need to buy furniture, if you need to buy new appliances. Like, there's all kinds of things to think about here.
And I think there's also like learning curve cost here when you come to Mexico
Yeah.
because you don't really know the prices and potentially you'll be overpaying for a few things. And if you want to avoid that, maybe you pay for lawyers and stuff like that. So definitely a lot of different expenses that could pop up that you probably wouldn't expect when you're just like thinking about coming to Mexico.
Yeah. So what's the right approach here? Instead of thinking I'm moving to Mexico because it's cheap, ask yourself these 3 questions. Does the lifestyle I want match my budget? Do I have the budget to be prepared for life's unexpected expenses? And have I considered the upfront moving costs and the learning curve of settling in?
So to summarize cost of living with our best advice, try to come here and kind of feel out how much your lifestyle would cost. So come here if you can for a couple weeks or for a month and do the exact things that you would do in your ideal life and see exactly what it would cost and see if that fits your budget.
Yeah, exactly. So go grocery shopping, use the public transportation or Uber or whatever. Stay in a place where you would like see yourself living and all that stuff because it will give you a clearer picture of how much things are going to cost.
Again, we don't want to invalidate anyone's reason for moving here for more financial reasons. We just want to paint a more complete picture about what things potentially cost here so you can be more prepared and then have a more successful move and more successful life here in Mexico.
Yeah, we just really want you to have the right expectations. Okay, guys. I know we're covering a lot here and that we're giving you a lot to think about and we hope it's useful, but we did create something that is going to be really useful because we want to help you like not worry about the part of getting Mexican residency, and that's why we created the Move to Mexico roadmap. This is a free email series that is going to send you a weekly email telling you exactly what to do each week, all with the goal to make you feel very at ease and stress-free with the whole Mexican residency process. We even included like short little videos help walking you through how to book your appointment and all those little technical things that can really set you back. Like we worked really, really hard on this, and I think it's going to make that whole residency process a lot easier for you. So after you're done watching this video, make sure to head to the link in the description or the first pinned comment and put your name and email and start getting the emails every week. It's like if we were holding your hand through the entire process, virtually, obviously. But it is a great resource and we're super proud of it. So make sure to check it out in the description because it's completely free. The third wrong reason to move to Mexico is seeking community and lifestyle changes, or I'm moving to Mexico for a fresh start. So a lot of people move to Mexico because they want to start a new chapter, they want a new lifestyle, they want just like a simpler and an easier life. But again, this is incomplete. So instead of saying things like, I'm moving to Mexico for a simpler, easier life, there are 3 challenges we want to help you think about if you're someone thinking about moving to Mexico to seek community and lifestyle changes.
Number 1, building your community takes time and effort. So you're probably not just going to land here in Mexico and immediately be surrounded by your people. You actually have to go out and make the effort to meet people. So if it's like attending local events or like expat meetups or even like local meetups, whatever that is related to like your hobbies, things like that. You really have to put yourself out there to kind of meet the people that you want to connect with.
Yeah, you have to look for it. We are not great at this. Like we know what we need to do, but actually, no, we're meeting someone next week, so that's good. But this matters a lot, and we've seen it in the center. So in Merida, in the city center, you see in the Santiago neighborhood all these cute little groups of people. Like we saw a group of women the other day that it was kind of like an art class. Like those things I think are advertised mostly on Facebook groups, like expat community groups, but it is important that you like become a part of it and like participate in the events because that's the only way that you're gonna find your people, and it's gonna take a few tries because like, you know, it's like dating, like you have to find the right crowd, I guess, like that you guys have a lot of stuff in common. But yeah, it is like easy because there's a lot of people here that could be like-minded and that you could like connect with, and there's groups that connect you guys, but you have to take the first step.
Number 2, slower pace is not the same as frustration-free. So Mexico definitely does have a different pace of life, and some of you might be looking for that. But that different pace is not always going to mean that things are easier and simpler, and it might cause some frustration. So sometimes certain elements of customer service are not as maybe like well communicated, or as like timely as they are back home, and that is something that you're going to have to deal with here in Mexico.
Yeah.
There's also bureaucracy that can slow down certain things.
Yeah, I think like when you think about slower pace, is like slower pace for
it's
everything.
all encompassing.
Yeah, you have to love all of it.
And remember, the expats that come here and are successful and really thrive are the ones that embrace everything. And in Mexico, that means going with the flow. So
And not constantly like comparing with
exactly.
how it used to be. That's very important.
Number 3, you'll need to build new routines and hobbies. So coming here to Mexico, it's very hard to recreate the exact lifestyle that you had in the US or wherever.
Yeah.
You really have to kind of go out there and again, kind of make the effort to set up your new ideal lifestyle. So if that's discovering new hobbies, meeting new people, studying Spanish, whatever it is to kind of build your new lifestyle, it takes effort again.
Yeah, and it is important that you do it though, because it's what's gonna make your life here like more successful. You're gonna feel less lonely. It's just gonna be like generally just a better life here in Mexico. And one thing to add there is that we do want to encourage you to learn Spanish, because we didn't mention this in the first point, but like meeting locals and connecting with locals is a big part of feeling like you're part of the culture here. So Spanish is a must. That could also be like your new hobby. There's many tools that teach you like Spanish or new languages in general. One of the one we like a lot is called italki, where you can talk with a local, so you can even like maybe pick up a Mexican accent, or you can learn the local phrases. But if you like the more like traditional route of like lessons and all this stuff, Rosetta Stone is also a great way. We're gonna put both of those links in the description, because I don't think I can say this enough in our videos, but like please like try to learn some basic phrases when you come here. So instead of just thinking I'm moving to Mexico for a fresh start, ask yourself, am I willing to put in the effort to meet people and build friendships? Am I open to adapting to a different pace of life and new ways of doing things? And if the answer is yes, then you are off to a great start. Our best advice here is to be patient with yourself, because it does take time. Like it's gonna take a little bit to settle in and to figure everything out, and then you add on top of that meeting new people. Like we mentioned, we're literally meeting someone next week, and it's been 3 months, almost 2.5 months since we're here. So it takes a little bit, just like there's a lot of changes happening. So learn to be patient with yourself. And the second thing, let go of expectations. The more you embrace change instead of resisting it, the happier you'll be. And I wrote down 3 words that I want to like remember for ourselves and also for you guys. Embrace, don't expect. That is the key to happiness here in Mexico.
The next wrong reason to move to Mexico is affordable healthcare. That sounds controversial. Stay with me. So there's a lot of like misinformation and misconceptions about healthcare here in Mexico. As a general statement, it is high quality and it is a lot more affordable than in the US. But if you're thinking that, oh, I'm just gonna come down to Mexico because healthcare is fantastic and free, that is really going to get you into a lot of trouble. So there's a few things to know. Public versus private healthcare, you need to know the difference. So this one I'm going to approach pretty high level. So Mexico does have private and public hospitals, but the quality is not necessarily the same. So before I get into it, let's just say that it's great that Mexico does have the public healthcare system. However, as a foreigner, it's typically not recommended that you use the public system. So even though the doctors can be great, they don't always have all the resources available to provide excellent care. Also, it is not free. And then private healthcare or private hospitals, that's typically where you have better facilities, often the same doctors as the public hospitals, but just maybe easier access to specialists, and the care there is typically considered better than the public system. Number 2, private insurance and out-of-pocket costs can still add up. So many expats assume that they can just pay out of pocket for their healthcare costs and their healthcare needs here in Mexico, and to be fair, a lot of them do. And if you're not facing like a huge emergency or crisis situation, then the costs are pretty reasonable. Like if you break your arm or roll your ankle really badly, then it's not crazy to pay those kind of expenses out of pocket. However, if something crazy happens, like God forbid you have a stroke, a heart attack, or some kind of major medical crisis,
Yeah.
then if you don't have insurance, the costs will just crush you. So it can cost like tens of thousands of dollars, first of all, for these kind of treatments, to like stabilize you for heart attacks, those kind of things. And also, if you go to a private hospital and you're like having a heart attack, if you can't prove that you are able to cover the costs, either by having a credit card with a huge limit or just somehow being able to show that you can pay the deposit to enter, they can refuse treatment. So these are obviously for-profit hospitals, and they are not required to offer treatments. Also, private healthcare insurance here in Mexico, it is more affordable than in the US, thankfully, because in the US it's very expensive. But it's not like not a cost you have to think about. So depending on your age, it can easily be about like $2,000, $2,500 per year. I think for people our age, older in the 30s, it costs about $1,500 per year. So not free.
And sometimes like not all your pre-existing conditions are covered. So that's also something to think about.
That's true. Number 3, not all healthcare is equal across Mexico. So the quality of hospitals and also the availability of specialists, it varies a lot depending on where you are in the country. So typically the bigger cities do have better private hospitals. So talking about Mexico City, Guadalajara, Puebla, and also like more tourist-centric areas. So Puerto Vallarta, Cancun have a lot of like specialist treatment options. That is not necessarily the case when you go into the smaller towns. So I guess the quality does go down a little bit, and also availability of like certain treatments. So if you have very specific medical needs, it's not that you can just like go anywhere in Mexico and expect there to be care available for your needs. So definitely something to think about.
So instead of thinking, I heard healthcare in Mexico is amazing and basically free, ask yourself, do I understand the difference between public and private healthcare? Am I able to afford private healthcare, or am I willing to take the financial risk if a serious emergency occurs? And is the city I'm moving to equipped for all my medical needs?
So an easy way to think about this is, first of all, think about where you want to move to, and if you are kind of comfortable with the healthcare situation there, if you have specific medical needs, make sure that they can be covered there. And also be very sure that you budget for healthcare, even though you are moving to Mexico. Remember, nothing here is free, so private health insurance, even the public health insurance, is a cost. And if you do decide to pay out of pocket, just be sure that you have like a cushion to be able to pay for that. And again, to restate this, like none of this is to kind of discredit moving to Mexico for healthcare reasons. We just want to be very transparent that it's like not just coming here and it's like, oh yeah, if something happens, then I'll just go to a hospital and it'll cost nothing. No, you can like really get in trouble by making the wrong assumption, and we want to make sure that you guys succeed here.
And then you have like all the information to make the right decision for you. And last but not least, wrong reason to move to Mexico is weather. AKA, I can't wait to escape winter forever.
Sounds valid. Sounds valid to me.
This one was kind of hard to include, but I promise there's a lot of layers to this because we are huge fans of the hottest parts of Mexico, for sure. We lived in Chicago for 7 years, well, him for 5 years, and we just made it our life mission to just escape winter, and we have successfully done it, and I'm very proud of ourselves, and we are much happier because of that.
This time with boiling water.
Okay, 1,
My safety gloves.
2, 3. Whoa. So if you're someone thinking, oh, Mexico has perfect weather all year round, no matter where you go, or anywhere in Mexico has to be better than where I live right now, there are some things to consider here. So if you don't do your proper research, you can find yourself in places that are way hotter, way colder, more humid than you were expecting. So let's get into, you have something to say?
I was going to say, it's March in Merida, and the actual temperature this weekend will hit 99 degrees. The actual temperature. So it feels like we'll be triple digits.
So yeah, a lot to uncover.
Know what you're getting yourself into. So Mexico is a very large country, and it has different climates. So most people are probably familiar with coastal Mexico, where it's pretty hot and humid and tropical most of the year. But if you're talking about the central highlands and the cities and the high mountains, it gets pretty chilly there. So like when you wake up in the morning, it can very easily be like 40 degrees Fahrenheit in certain towns during certain parts of the year. So definitely be aware of that. And also the seasons are different. So if you come here to visit like November through March and you're like, oh, it's so pleasant, like it's cool and It's not as hot as they say or whatever. Just note that the seasons here are different, and like
Yeah.
when April and May comes, you could just be in intense heat.
Yeah.
There's also like hurricane season that can happen in the tropics. So
Yeah, so when you're picking your location, make sure you're thinking about the weather the entire year, not just the best month.
Number 2, consider altitude and extreme weather. So these are 2 other factors that often get overlooked. So as I talked about, like the mountains in central Mexico, they're really quite high. So if you're not used to altitude, you could suffer from that. So
Yeah.
for example, like Mexico City, Guanajuato, when we're there, we struggle. Like walking up 2
Yeah.
flights of stairs, it's
Yeah.
like all our
My dad-
oxygen leaves our blood.
We were there with
body.
my dad a couple of years ago, and he needed oxygen. So
Mm-hmm.
that was pretty scary. So if you have like issues with that and have experienced altitude sickness, like just know that it can affect you a lot. So you do have to think about this.
Yeah, and I think also in these central highlands, like the mountain areas, the air is super dry.
Mm-hmm.
So it typically is a drier climate in these areas, and like you can just feel it in your skin,
In
in
your-
your sinuses, and it gets really dusty
Your
too.
lips, like it's intense.
So if you have like asthma or like respiratory issues, that could also be something to think about.
Yeah.
And then when it comes to the more extreme weather, it's good to be informed and prepared. So Mexico does get hurricanes on both sides, the Pacific and Caribbean side. So know that that can be a thing, and kind of assess whether you're comfortable with the risk of being hit by a hurricane.
Yeah.
Basically, I don't know how else to say it.
He's Floridian. He does not care too much.
Yeah.
Not care, but like worry too much.
I don't worry too much.
Yeah.
Also, this isn't exactly weather, but like earthquakes happen a lot in Mexico, especially
Yeah.
in the more like mountainous area. Actually, you don't know this, but there was an earthquake yesterday off the coast of Oaxaca. Like it happens all the time.
Okay.
These things happen. So test your tolerance for these kind of things as well. And what's the other one? Oh, the infrastructure.
Yeah.
So when there are hurricanes, obviously there can be flooding because
You can lose power.
there's power.
Yeah. And also, if you're somewhere that experiences very hot or very cold temperatures, the houses and the apartments are not always equipped with AC or heating. So we were in Guanajuato, this is just an example, like a couple years ago in January, and our apartment was great, but it didn't have heating. It just had like the space heaters. I was glued to that thing like in the mornings. It was unbearable. Mind you, we are wimps when it comes to hot weather. That's
But it
why
was
we're in
cold.
Merida. But it was freezing. It was not comfortable. So you do have to think about those things when you're picking a place to live. Like, what do you like? What do you prefer? And consider the weather all year round, because all of these 3 things matter very
I have one more
much.
point. Mexico also is very dry in certain parts of the country, so droughts happen, and the water supply is also
Yeah.
very much affected.
Yeah.
So obviously Mexico City, or not obviously, but Mexico City has been in the news a lot. They run out of water
Yeah.
during the end of their dry season, and it's also kind of happening in other cities.
Yeah.
So that's also kind of like an extreme weather situation
Yeah.
that can affect your life.
Yeah, factor that in.
So our best advice for weather, really do try to feel out a city that you're going to live in, a city or town that you're going to live in for all seasons, especially if you plan to live there full time.
Yeah.
Because the climate can vary a lot. So I think actually a lot of people leave Merida because it's so
Yeah,
brutally hot.
people have told us.
And like
yeah.
you can't underestimate it. Like April and May are brutally hot. So like if you're gonna be here 12 months a year, make sure that you're comfortable with that,
Yeah.
or like whatever weather situation is where you're going, and
Yeah.
feel it out.
Yeah.
Also make sure the home that you're moving into can make you more comfortable. So in Merida, obviously that means air conditioning, but AC can be expensive if you run it all the time. So
Yeah.
you need solar panels. Do you have AC? Like,
Yeah.
can you put it everywhere? That kind of thing.
The same way for heating. If you're somewhere that it gets cold during certain parts of the year, then make sure you have heating and that you factor in those heating costs. So if there's one thing we hope you take away from this video, is that moving to Mexico is an incredible opportunity, but this is not a decision that you should make blindly or in a rush. Mexico has so much to offer. We're obviously huge fans, but moving here means loving all of it. The good, the unexpected, the bad, and everything in between. This decision isn't about escaping something back home, wherever you're from. This decision is about building a life that's actually better for you. the people who truly thrive here in Mexico are people who are patient, open-minded, and they're willing to learn. They love Mexico, they love and respect the culture, and they just try to make their community a better place for everyone, not just for themselves.
Yeah, I think the context that we shared in this video will hopefully just leave you more prepared to come here and thrive, because you have a better idea of the different things to factor into a successful move. So that's also why we created it. It's not, again, to say that any of these reasons that we mentioned are a wrong reason to move. It's just that you want the full picture to be able to kind of picture how you will be able to settle here in Mexico.
Yeah, it was inspired by, we did a lot of research for this video, and we just read so many stories, and they all the people that failed at like living here, they kind of had the same things in common. So that's why we made the video. So we don't want that to happen to you. And also I want to say that we didn't think about 80% of these things. This is because, like, I mean, I guess we are kind of different because we haven't had a home in 4 years. We have slept in, like, I don't know, like 100 places in the last 4 years. So we know we're adaptable, and we know that we don't need like a lot. Like, we know that a place feels like home, like literally 20 minutes after we arrive, and that's just us. And the main thing is that we love Mexico. Like, we love everything about this country, and I think that's why we can be okay with a lot of the bad stuff. Like, we just don't really even think about it, you know? So I think that's also a big reason to move here. Like, the right reason is that you just have to love Mexico so much.
So we hope that this video gave you a few things to think about. And remember, if you want to make the residency process much easier, check out our Mexican residency roadmap that you can get in the description and that top pinned comment. So if this all left you feeling a little bit overwhelming, that will make you not feel overwhelmed by the residency process. Also, if you want to watch another video about life here in Mexico, check out this one next and leave your questions
in the comments. Thank you for watching, and we'll see you in the next video. Bye.
Gracias.
Ciao. Cut.
Out.